specifications that matter. On the 2018 iPad, we have a 9.7-inch Retina display that's 2048 by 1536 for a total PPI of around 265 pixels per inch. So it's got plenty of resolution here for most folks at this size. 8-megapixel camera on the rear that shoots up to 1080p, so nothing special there. Apple A10 Fusion chip, that's a quad-core chip found in the iPhone 7 Plus, brought over to the budget 2018 iPad. Plenty of power for most users. 2 gigabytes of RAM is enough for an iPad, as iPads don't generally have efficiency problems and RAM management issues, so that's plenty enough here for the iPad as well. But the iPad mini takes it up a notch. We're going to talk about how in a minute, but those are the key specs here. You also do get 32 gigabytes of base storage and a price tag of around $329. So over here for the iPad mini, key specs that matter: 7.9-inch Retina display. This gives you 324 pixels per inch, 8-megapixel camera on the rear, so it seems like the same one from the iPad, the 2018 iPad. 3 gigabytes of RAM, and the big deal here is the Apple A12 Bionic chipset, a 5124 milliamp hour battery here for this device, giving you 10 hours. You actually get 10 hours on both of these, more like 11 in real world use with the iPad 2018. And a price tag here for the iPad mini of $399, but you're gonna find these on deals throughout the year. So if you don't want to get it now, you might see Labor Day sales, or you might see sales on holidays on the iPad mini as well as this one. And they both obviously run the latest version of iOS. Now, this part is easy, design, because when it comes to design, they're exactly the same except for size. So on the iPad, you have, the bezels on the side, top and the bottom, pretty big. I mean, we're used to this newer stretched out, display thing going on with the new Pros, but the bezels are actually smaller feeling on the bigger iPad because there's more screen real estate. It's just in a bigger body. The back here looks identical to this new iPad mini. Flat camera, no flash. Got your volume rockers over here, power button, no silent switch like the classic iPad. At the bottom, you have your stereo speakers and just smooth rounded corners here with the headphone jack up at the top. So iPad right there, big Apple logo. So overall, I really just think it's a clean classic iPad design, and one of the reasons why Apple has sold a ton of this iPad, because just classic. And the iPad mini, this is also the white version. I did trade in my black one back to get the white one. I actually didn't really prefer the black one so much. I wanted to try out this white one. So if you're wondering why don't you have the black one anymore, that's why. But the bezels are actually a little bit more noticeable, I feel like, on the iPad mini because it's crammed in a smaller body, but the design is pretty much the same. The bezels are actually a little thicker on the sides of the iPad 2018, whereas they're pretty thin on the iPad mini, but top and bottom are pretty thick. Both have home buttons right here, and on the back, it looks identical to that iPad, just smaller. So you have the camera right there, power button, volume rockers, and then over here we have a headphone jack, Apple logo. iPad at the bottom, you have yourself the speakers and the lightning port. So both do support the lightning port, no USB-C. Overall, the design is just beautiful to me on both in terms of being classic iPad. Is it innovative, groundbreaking? No, but are these beautiful products? Yes, they're just a little bit old looking, but they're still beautiful products here. I personally prefer the iPad mini because I think it's just really nice to have this. I just think it's really niche and really cool to have your classic iPad in such a small package here for the iPad mini. So let's talk about the display quality on both. The iPad from 2018 does not give you true tone display, which is actually very useful if you're reading a lot. So people like to read a lot. The iPad mini has true tone and it's going to adjust properly, giving you less eye strain in actual use. Now, I feel like the iPad from 2018's display looks brighter. That could be an illusion just because it's so much bigger, because there's just more display area just bright in your face. So it just feels brighter on the iPad over here. This one's sharper. I said earlier at 324 versus 264, but because you don't hold this iPad as close to your face as this one, you will not even notice the difference in sharpness. Now, when it comes to color accuracy, you have the P3 color gamut over here on this one. So the iPad mini is actually going to give you a little bit better colors than that of the iPad from 2018. So if you're into color accuracy and stuff like that, this one looks a little bit more washed out in terms of display, and the iPad mini is a little bit better looking. So I think the quality of the panel is better for the iPad mini, but not enough for the general consumer to even notice. So I would not choose this based on color accuracy, that kind of things. If you want true tone, get the iPad mini, but if you're fine with, just a standard Retina display, both of these are going to suffice. You really got to decide at this $300 to $400 price range, do I want the bigger display or the smaller display? All right, guys, so when it comes to software, they're both running Apple's iOS, so that makes total sense that they would both be a similar experience. But at the same time, applications are just bigger and just more classic iPad over here on the 2018. So I think that if you really want to use an iPad as an iPad, I think you're really gonna like the 2018, because this is closer to like a Kindle size, like an iPhone size. Yes, an iPhone doesn't replace an iPad mini by no means, but I think the iPad experience is actually just more vibrant and large on a bigger iPad. So if you want the true iPad experience, you still got to get the larger one. If you want a compact iPad experience that's more travel friendly, you'll still like the iPad mini. I just feel like having the bigger apps, maybe because I'm so used to using iPad for so long, it just feels more iPad-like, if that makes any sense, for the iPad 2018. So the iPad mini's display is cramped when using some of the applications. For example, when drawing here, it's going to be a cramped experience drawing on the iPad mini over here versus on the iPad 2018. It's going to be a lot larger of a drawing experience, and that's because you have much more displays. Other than that, they both have gestures, which is nice here. They both run applications the same exact way. They both have the dock, and yes, even though the iPad mini is so small, you can still populate the dock with a lot of applications. They both have Apple Pencil support. They both have home buttons, so virtually, again, just like with the display, just a larger experience. Software is identical. So when it comes to performance, you can see that the iPad from 2018 is just nowhere near that of the iPad from 2019, the mini version right here. Now I am on 12.1.4, 12.2, but that doesn't make a difference at all in this test because this is a processor performance test. And you can see 4808, 11,000. I mean, this is not even close, but I've never once said, hey, you know what? I'm craving so much more performance off my iPads from 2018 to this iPad mini. You're not gonna notice really anything in the day-to-day use besides maybe if you're opening up a game or something like that, but applications, they open about the same. Now, if the iPad mini had, no home button, had just only gestures, Pro Motion display, you would see a bigger difference. Having the A12 does ensure you better support for long term. So the iPad mini is still better value in performance because it's only $70 more for a much more powerful processor. But the processor in iPad mini is more geared towards people at older iPad minis, and we're looking for an upgrade in performance not versus the 2018 iPad. But if you're deciding between these two budget options you can get right now, the iPad mini is the better choice in terms of performance. There's one major reason only to buy the iPad mini, it would be here for the processor alone. Even though it's not that noticeable, it still has a technically more powerful processor, and I would make my decision based on processor here between these two very important. Okay, so when it comes to cameras, they both have the same rear cameras, just about 8 megapixels, and they both shoot 1080p 30 frames per second. So perfectly serviceable photos on the back of both of these. You're not going to be disappointed, but I don't think you're going to be like, wow, this is so much better than my phone, because it's absolutely not. These cameras are not iPad Pro cameras, which are pretty much equal to your phone. These are just iPad photos, and they work well for scanning documents, maybe a quick snap. You're not trying to miss a moment in the house. Maybe you're reading your iPad, your dog runs past you, and you got to take that quick photo. You don't want to miss that memory, that moment. This guy will do fine. Now, one area where you will notice a difference is the front-facing cameras. The front-facing camera for the iPad is actually a 1.2 megapixel camera, so very not so great camera. It's enough to do some FaceTime calls, take a quick photo. Again, tons of noise, tons of grain here for the 2018 iPad. But again, I don't think many people are going to be taking selfies. They might just use that for FaceTime. Over here on the iPad mini though, you are going to get yourself a 7 megapixel front-facing camera. Now that gets closer to an iPhone on the front of the iPad mini, so it's a very noticeable difference in sharpness on the front-facing camera for the iPad mini. I should mention also though that you can do up to 1080p 30 front-facing video for iPad mini, only 720/30 on the 2018 iPad from the front. Now both of these do come with stereo speakers, as we pointed out when we were talking about the bodies and the specs, and they both get plenty loud. The iPad from 2018 is loud enough, and over here we have stereo speakers on the bottom. They also get loud enough. I'm happy to see a 2019 iPad still with a headphone jack. If you don't really care to use external speakers, you do have the headphone jack as well. I should also mention that in my experience, I found that the Bluetooth connects faster for the iPad mini, and that makes sense because you have Bluetooth 5.0. For you all who use Bluetooth devices a lot, the iPad mini will be better. And let's talk about a key area, and that's battery life. Now, Apple rates both of these at 10 hours of battery life. I'm actually getting better battery life for the 2018 iPad. I'm getting about 11 and a half hours of battery life on the 2018 iPad, whereas I'm getting about 9.5 to 10 on the new iPad mini. Okay, so both of these do support the Apple Pencil. Now the iPad mini still supports the first generation, as does the 2018. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna try to draw an iPad over here. Let's see if we can do this. Shouldn't be that hard, it's just a tablet. And then we'll go right here. And there's my attempt at drawing an iPad right there. So that's an iPad over there. Now, the way you connect this is if you have to go ahead and put it in the lightning port. So it's not a magnetic connection like the Pro, which is very nice, but it's still an odd way to connect the device here, but it does work. And once you get it connected, you won't be thinking about that too much. But having this bigger display here makes it a lot more fun to draw on the iPad over here, the 2018. So if you are going to be using this for Apple Pencil usage a lot, I would suggest you get the 2018 iPad. Look how much better my iPad turned out than this one over here. Just a lot more clean because I had a lot more room to write. Also, if you're taking notes, you have a lot more screen area to take notes over here on this iPad. Over here on the iPad mini, you can see just a little bit less area. So you're going to run out of room a little bit more if you're taking notes. Okay, so which iPad is the better value? Which one should you buy? First of all, I just want to say for students, I think it's the iPad. This one over here, the 2018. And that's because students need long battery life. It has better battery life than the iPad mini. They need a big display for writing notes and taking, doing drawings and stuff. Maybe you're a visual note taker. You have plenty of space here to get work done on this iPad over here. And keyboard will be much more comfortable to type on if you get a keyboard case for this 2018 iPad. Also, it's cheaper for students, which often are using their funds for books, classes, stuff like that. This is the better iPad for students. The iPad though, mini is the better purchase in terms of a value standpoint for everybody else, because A12 CPU right here is way more powerful than the A10